Years had passed. Success had remade Elena, but scars remained hidden beneath her quiet smile. When an invitation arrived, it set the stage for a return no one expected. The wedding villa shimmered in the late afternoon sun, its Renaissance arches draped with white roses and silver ribbons. A string quartet played near the fountain, their notes floating through the manicured gardens. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled, sipping champagne beneath chandeliers strung from ancient olive trees. It was a spectacle worthy of the Rinaldi name. And Marco, standing tall at the altar in his custom Armani tuxedo, felt like the crown jewel of the day. He scanned the crowd with a practiced smile, his pride swelling. Soon, Isabella would walk down the aisle, and with her on his arm, his transformation would be complete. But there was one more piece to his performance. The thought of Elena made him smirk. He imagined her slipping quietly into the back row, perhaps wearing one of her modest dresses. Maybe she would try to blend into the shadows, ashamed of the contrast. He could already hear the whispers, "That's the ex-wife? How plain she looks. How unfortunate. Yes, today would be perfect." Just as the ushers guided the final guests to their seats, the distant purr of an engine drew heads toward the gravel driveway. At first it was faint, but as the vehicle approached, the sound deepened into a rich, resonant growl, the kind only a limousine could produce. Conversations faltered. Glasses froze mid-air. The quartet stumbled to a halt as eyes shifted toward the villa gates. And then it appeared. A white limousine, polished to a mirror sheen, glided up the driveway with regal grace. Sunlight danced across its chrome grille, and the spirit of ecstasy hood ornament gleamed like a jewel. The car seemed to float, its presence both commanding and effortless, as if the very air around it parted in reverence. The murmurs began immediately. "Is that a limousine? Who on earth would arrive in such a car? Is it one of Isabella's society friends?" Marco stiffened, his smile faltering. He hadn't arranged this. The door opens. The chauffeur, dressed in immaculate black, stepped out and walked with crisp precision to the rear door. He pulled it open with a gloved hand. And from the limousine emerged Elena. She wore a gown the color of midnight, flowing silk that shimmered with every step. The dress hugged her figure with effortless elegance, its simplicity highlighting rather than overshadowing her natural grace. Her hair, once hurriedly pinned back during their married years, now cascaded in soft waves. Around her neck glinted a single pearl pendant, understated, but radiant. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That's her? The ex-wife? She's stunning. She looks like royalty." Elena paused for a moment, letting her gaze sweep across the villa, the crowd, the altar. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her chin lifted, her posture regal. She was no longer the weary woman Marco had abandoned, she was transformed. And then, just as the whispers peaked, 3 smaller figures stepped out of the car behind her. The triplets. Matteo, in a crisp navy suit, walked with the same steady stride as his mother. Sophia, wearing a pale lavender dress, clutched her small silver purse with practiced elegance. Luca, in matching navy, adjusted his tiny bow tie with all the seriousness of a gentleman. The crowd melted. "Oh, my goodness, look at them. Are those her children? Triplets? How beautiful." The children's presence was like sunlight breaking through clouds. They were polished yet natural, exuding the same quiet dignity Elena did. Each held themselves with a confidence that belied their age. The chauffeur closed the phantom's door and followed discreetly, leaving Elena and her children to walk down the villa's pathway, every guest's eyes locked on them. At the altar, Marco's throat tightened. His jaw slackened as he stared. This wasn't the picture he had rehearsed. This wasn't a woman defeated. Elena glided forward, her hand gently resting on Sophia's shoulder, her sons flanking her like young princes. She smiled, not arrogantly, but serenely, the kind of smile that needed no words to proclaim victory. Marco felt the burn of humiliation crawl up his neck. He glanced at Isabella, but she had fixed her gaze on Elena with narrowed eyes, her lips pressed in a thin line. Even Isabella, the unshakable heiress, seemed unsettled. As Elena and her children moved among the guests, people parted instinctively, giving them space as though royalty had entered the room. Compliments floated toward her. "You look divine, Signora. The children are remarkable. Such elegance." Elena responded with warmth, her voice calm, her laughter light. She was approachable yet untouchable, a paradox that only made her more magnetic. Marco's chest clenched. This was supposed to be his stage, his triumph. But now, every eye was on her. Finally, Elena reached the front rows. She paused, just a few steps from the altar. For a brief moment, the world seemed to still, the music, the murmurs, even the breeze quieted. Her eyes met Marco's. It wasn't anger she carried in her gaze, nor bitterness. It was something far more devastating, pity. A look that said, without words, "I survived you. I thrived without you. And now, you are the one exposed." Marco's chest tightened as if invisible hands were squeezing his lungs. He tried to muster a smirk, to reclaim some control, but his lips quivered instead. Whispers spread like wildfire among the guests. "She outshines even the bride. Do you see how Marco looks at her? As if he didn't expect this. She's triumphant, and he didn't even know it." The humiliation Marco had planned for Elena had reversed. Every smile, every glance, every whisper was a mirror reflecting his pettiness, his arrogance, his failure to see her worth. Elena guided her children to their seats, unhurried, graceful. She sat tall, folding her hands neatly in her lap. She had no need for grand gestures. No need for revenge. Her very presence was enough. The Rolls-Royce, the children, the elegance, they spoke louder than any words could. Marco turned his eyes away, unable to bear the truth. He had hoped to bury her under shame. Instead, he stood at his own wedding, exposed before his bride, his guests, and himself. The man who had sought to disgrace his ex-wife now stood disgraced in her shadow. And the wedding had only just begun. The villa's courtyard, once filled with the carefree hum of celebration, now buzzed with an undercurrent of unease. The quartet resumed their music, but the notes faltered, offbeat and tentative, as though even the musicians were distracted by Elena's arrival. The bride had not yet walked down the aisle. Still, it already felt as though the ceremony had been hijacked by an uninvited queen. Elena sat in the second row, her posture impeccable, her triplets settled gracefully beside her. The limousine gleamed in the distance, its presence a silent sentinel of her triumph. Guests stole glances at her, unable to resist. Women admired her poise, whispering about her gown and wondering how she had transformed so elegantly. Men, even those loyal to Isabella, couldn't deny her magnetic presence. And though Elena kept her eyes fixed serenely on the altar, Marco could feel the weight of her existence pressing against him like an unbearable spotlight. Inside the villa, Isabella prepared for her grand entrance. Her gown, an intricate masterpiece of lace and diamonds, sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Two bridesmaids fussed over her veil while her father adjusted his cufflinks. But Isabella noticed the shift in atmosphere the moment she stepped toward the doorway. The murmur of the crowd wasn't the expectant buzz reserved for a bride, it was the hum of curiosity, admiration, and scandal. As she peered through the archway, her gaze fell on Elena. For a fleeting second, Isabella's smile cracked. The ex-wife. The woman she had been warned about in hushed tones. Instead of a faded shadow, Elena sat like a rival queen in her court. Worse, she had brought 3 children, each dressed like heirs to a legacy Isabella could never touch. Isabella's jaw tightened. Her grip on her bouquet left a faint imprint in the petals. This was supposed to be her day. Marco felt the sweat bead at his temples. He forced a smile at the priest, at the guests, at no one in particular. His charm, the tool he had wielded for years, was suddenly clumsy, brittle, almost desperate. He caught Isabella's eye as she began her walk down the aisle. He widened his smile, as if to say, "Focus on us. Ignore her." But Isabella's eyes flicked coldly toward Elena before returning to her groom. And that flicker was enough. Marco saw it. He felt it like a dagger. The guests rose as Isabella entered, her father escorting her with practiced grandeur. The string quartet steadied, swelling with music. Yet even as Isabella glided down the aisle, whispers followed in her wake. "She's beautiful, but, did you see Elena? The ex-wife outshines the bride. Those children, so striking, so dignified." Isabella heard them. The whispers crawled beneath her skin. She kept her smile frozen, her eyes fixed ahead, but her heart hammered with fury. When Isabella reached the altar, Marco took her hand, kissing it lightly. "You're radiant," he whispered, his smile strained. "Am I?" she murmured back, her eyes cutting briefly toward Elena. "Because half your guests seem to think otherwise." Marco stiffened. "Ignore her. She means nothing." But Isabella saw the flicker in his eyes, the twitch in his jaw. Elena meant something, all right, maybe more than Marco dared admit. The priest cleared his throat and began the traditional vows. His voice echoed through the courtyard, solemn and measured. But focus was impossible. Elena's presence was like a candle in a darkened room, no matter how one tried, eyes were drawn back to her glow. Even the priest, at one point, faltered, his gaze sliding briefly toward the second row before regaining composure. Marco shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. Isabella's smile thinned with every passing second. By the time the vows reached the midpoint, the atmosphere had curdled. Guests no longer whispered. They exchanged glances openly, some even smiling toward Elena in acknowledgement. A prominent businessman leaned toward his wife and whispered too loudly, "She's remarkable." To think Marco left her. Elena caught the words but gave no reaction. She simply reached for Luca's small hand, holding it gently, her eyes still calm. Isabella, however, heard them too. Her grip on Marco's hand tightened like a vice. With every step into that wedding hall, Elena's silent triumph echoed louder than words. But what unfolded next would unravel the very ceremony itself. Join me in the next video as the wedding begins to fall apart. Remember to subscribe and keep the journey alive.